So today we're going to be making creme brulees, which translates to burnt cream. And in spite of the fact that the name makes these things sound all fancy, this is actually one of the easier desserts to prepare. The most common mistake people have is actually overcooking them. And I will go over that in this video, but there are also a few other things during the process that can make the whole thing a lot more foolproof and a lot easier. And I will go over all that as well. So with that, let's get to it. Okay, getting started with our ingredients, we've got 2 cups or 16 ounces of heavy cream, 1/2 of a cup or 4 ounces of sugar, 6 egg yolks, 1/2 of a vanilla bean, and finally a small pinch of salt. So with all of that measured out, let's head over to the stove top, and with a small sauce pot over medium heat, add the cream and split the vanilla bean down the middle, toss that in, and go ahead and add the salt as well. Whisk all of it together and slowly heat everything up, infusing the vanilla bean and dissolving the salt along the way. Okay, while this heats up, you want to make sure to keep a very close eye on it and keep the heat on medium. Don't turn it up to high, because when dairy products come to a boil, they will climb the sides of the pan and boil over the edge. So with this, I guess you can put a tack in the column of keeping the recipe foolproof and avoiding common mistakes. So keep an eye on this, and while this is getting going, let's get our eggs and sugar ready. Go ahead and add the sugar into the mixing bowl containing the egg yolks, and you want to very briefly whisk this together. You don't want to incorporate any air into it or anything like that. The sugar isn't going to fully dissolve in this stage, but what it will do is it's going to help the eggs become a little bit more resistant to curdling or scrambling when we add the hot liquid. So to prep everything up for that, first lay out a damp towel to hold the bowl in place while the heavy cream mixture is added. And speaking of that, the pot has reached a gentle simmer, so we can take it off the burner and very slowly at first add it to the egg and sugar mixture. And this technique is referred to as tempering, where you gradually add hot liquid to the eggs, bringing them up to temperature while constantly stirring, and this prevents them from scrambling. Now once the eggs become slightly acclimated, the liquid can be added more rapidly, as there is no longer the threat of the sudden shock and temperature change. And once you've got the custard fully mixed together, the final step here is to wring out the seeds from the vanilla bean pod into the custard. And some people like to do this at the beginning, but either way, don't forget this step. And with that, we're ready to head back over to the stove top, where I've placed a few brulee ramekins inside of a baking dish, and as long as you didn't over whisk the custard a moment ago, you should pretty much be able to fill these things all the way to the top or close to it without having to worry about them rising in the oven and spilling over the edge. And one more thing before putting them into the oven is you might notice a few bubbles or a bit of foam on the top. The way to get rid of that is to use a torch. Just quickly skim the torch across the top, but be very careful with it. The torch can scorch the top very easily. Okay, these creme brulees are ready to go into the oven right now, but we need to add water to the pan, and what the water does is it more evenly disperses heat throughout the pan, which results in a more gentle cooking process. But what a lot of people do is they'll just add the water in right now, and then when they're lifting it into the oven, you have to be careful not to slosh it around and get the water inside the custard. So a more easy way to do that, or an easier way to do this, is to just put the pan in the oven. Again, be careful with it. And we're gonna add the water right now. Again, be careful not to splash it. You want the water about halfway up the height of the ramekins. And the final step here is to put a lid on the pan. And since I don't have a lid for this particular pan that's in the oven, this sheet tray is gonna have to do. So just place the sheet tray on top, close the door, and these are gonna be baked at 325 degrees, which is a pretty standard cooking temperature for baked custards. And the amount of time sort of depends on how hot the custard is when it goes into the oven. Let's say the custard is still really hot, you had just, heated the cream up, tempered the eggs, and it goes straight into the oven. It might only take about 15 minutes, but in that case, you might check it after 10 minutes just to be on the safe side. Mine actually cooled slightly because I had to, since I'm filming, I had to move around cameras and lighting equipment and all that. So in my case, they might take about 20 minutes. Let's say you would chill the mixture all the way, which is something that frequently happens in restaurants where they make a large batch of the custard mixture and then bake what they need as they go. In that case, it might be 35 or 40 minutes, but you always want to keep an eye on it because, like I mentioned earlier, the biggest problem with creme brulees is overcooking them. So with these in the oven, let's learn a little bit about custards. Okay, by definition, a custard is any liquid that's thickened with cooked eggs. And obviously this is usually going to be dairy, and I can't really think of any non-dairy examples off the top of my head. So for the purposes of all this, we're gonna go with dairy. And there are two main types of custards. There are stirred custards, which are done on the stove top, and there are baked custards, which are cooked in the oven. And in the world of stirred custards, there are two main types. There's creme anglaise, or English sauce, and there's pastry cream, which is also known as creme pâtissière. And a few examples of baked custards would be the creme brulees that we're doing today, creme caramel or flan, pot de creme, cheesecakes, and custard pies. A few examples of custard pies would be pumpkin pies and pecan pies. And on the savory side of custards, you've got quiche. And a basic ratio to keep in the back of your head for custard making is 4 parts liquid and 1 part eggs. And if you're wondering which size of egg in particular that refers to, the answer is large eggs. Large eggs are the most common size of eggs seen in supermarkets, and they are also the most common size of egg used in restaurants. So if you come across a recipe where it doesn't actually specify which size of egg to use, the answer is large eggs. And a large egg weighs 2 ounces. The white weighs 1 ounce, the yolk weighs 2/3 of an ounce, and the shell weighs 1/3 of an ounce. So if you're needing to do that math for a particular part of the egg, use that ratio. And if you do the math on what we did for the creme brulees today, we started with 16 ounces of heavy cream, so we needed 4 ounces of egg yolk, so that would have been 6 egg yolks. So that's what I used in the recipe today. So with that, let's check back in on these things. Okay, these things have been in the oven for about 20 minutes now, so I'll remove the lid, set it aside, and when taking the pan out of the oven, be very careful and make sure that the water doesn't get inside the custard dishes. Of course, it's not the end of the world if it does, but you know, you have come this far, so try not to fuck it up now. And when checking them for doneness, what you want to do is tap the side of the pan. It should appear to be set, but also be a little bit jiggly. If they are completely set at this point, they're a bit overcooked, so shorten the cooking time on the next batch. And it is important to get them out of the pan quickly right now so that they don't continue to cook any further. And there are a few ways to do this. One is to carefully go about it with a pair of tongs. The other one is to use a thick glove or cover your hand with like 5 or 6 disposable gloves. And when they've cooled slightly, go ahead and place them into the refrigerator to fully set up. And after a couple of hours, they should be fully set. So to finish off with the brulee portion of this thing, sprinkle a thin layer of turbinado sugar across the surface. And that's the one that comes in a box that's labeled as sugar in the raw, and you might have to smooth it out along the edges for an even layer, but when it looks pretty good, grab your torch and run it across the surface, caramelizing the sugar on top. Try not to stay in the same spot for very long, and sometimes it will flare up a little bit, which isn't a big deal. Just keep going until the sugar is fully set up. And I should mention that if you don't have a torch, this can be done under the broiler, but be careful when doing that. Make sure not to scorch the top completely. And when the top is all finished up, we can garnish it. And I'm going to start by fanning out a strawberry, and to do that, cut thin strips into it without going all the way through, then sprawl it out and place it along the edge. And to go with the strawberry, I've got some other assorted berries as well as a few kiwi segments. I've always thought these match up flavor-wise with creme brulees really well, and of course the whole thing looks really nice when it comes together. So I just like to place them with no particular pattern in mind, just try to stagger them around each other, alternating the colors, and to offset some of the sweetness in this dish, I like to grate a little lime zest on top as well. And to finish the whole thing off, I think a small sprig of mint would look nice here. And there you have it, a delicious creme brulee that you can make at home yourself, and hopefully this video made the whole process seem a bit more approachable and less intimidating. And the last thing to do here is to check the inside for doneness, so when cutting into it, it should appear smooth. It shouldn't be scrambled or curdled in any way. And with that, we've reached the end of the video, so as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.